What I want to do is I want to give you guys a little bit of what we call free chicken. You guys doing pretty good? So we're going to give you a little extra stuff, right? One of the things that we talked about yesterday, we talked about that whole Arbor Knot, Canadian jam knot thing, and why that's not the best application for constructing things in the woods. And I want to kind of give you a demonstration of that today, and what is a better way of doing it that you can easily recover the cordage. And that's really the fault of that whole thing, is you can't recover the cordage. Once you do it, it's semi-permanent, okay? If you're gonna make something semi-permanent, you might as well lash it, because that's the proper way to do it. What we've got here is we've got a raised bed that requires no lashings and no cordage whatsoever. So all we've done is we've cut forks and leaned them against a tree at a 45-degree angle. We've used trash bags for friction on 2 poles that are sitting on top of that. And with these 6 mil trash bags, I can now get on this thing and make a raised bed if I don't kill myself. And I don't have to tie or lash or bind anything. So it requires no cordage. Now, some people would still say, oh, I don't know about all that. It might move on me in the middle of the night. If you're afraid of that, then you may want to tie it up, okay? But that's no reason to tie it up to a point where you have to cut cordage, because cordage is a resource, always, all right? And here's what happens, and this is kind of a problem with this whole thing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use 2 different types of cordage on this demonstration for you guys. I'm gonna use bank line first, because it will demonstrate the problem better. And then I'm gonna show you how to do it with bigger cordage you can see, all right? So let's just say that we're gonna take a 2-foot piece of this, fairly atypical for something we're gonna use for a quick binding or lashing, okay? And remember what I said, an arbor knot was meant for something that the line is under constant tension, not the object, like a fishing reel, okay? A fishing reel is an arbor, and it's the line is under constant tension, pulling against the stop knot against the arbor. If you use that for construction, then it's under stress from moving pieces within that circle. When Morskahansky invented the Canadian jam knot, which is based on an arbor knot, which incidentally isn't even in Ashley's book of knots, because it's actually 2 knots, not 1. It's a slip knot and an overhand stop knot. It's not 1 knot, it's 2. If you make a bushcraft zip tie, it's 3 knots. So now you've tied 3 knots in a single piece of cordage when you could have done it much easier and recoverable than jamming everything together. A jam knot has its application. If you took a bedroll and you put a Canadian jam knot in it and you cinched it down tight, it's not trying to move, it's just compressed. And it's not gonna move. And then you can take that tail and loosen it, and you can tighten it back up. And that was Morskahansky's actual implication for that knot, was to use for temporary binding on something that you're trying to compress, that you could get undone fairly easily if you needed to again, recover the cordage. So the fault comes in with using this for something that you're not going to be able to recover the cordage. So if I'm gonna use this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take and tie an overhand knot in my tail side, and this is my, now it becomes a Canadian jam knot because I've got a tail I can yank on, not just a stop knot. And I wrap it around my object, and I tie another overhand knot to the line, all right? And what happens when I pull this down is that this knot's gonna slide through this knot, and it's going to jam, just like that. Now, if I don't tie a 3rd knot in here up against that jam, as this moves, this completely loosens up, all right? So the only way you can avoid that is to come in here and crank this thing down, and then you've got to try to get as close a knot as you can in here, and you got to try to tie it right up against the other knot, which becomes a major league pain most of the time too. And now, it's still not perfectly tight, because I got a little bit of space there where I can get that knot butted up against there perfectly, but it's gonna hold, no question, right? And it's gonna be 300 and some pound test because I'm using 36 bank line. However, recovering this is not gonna happen. Now I'm gonna cut this, end of story. So I just threw away 2 feet of a non-renewable resource, okay? So let's cut that off of there real quick. And then we're gonna use this bigger rope to kind of demonstrate something else for you. When you guys learned this yesterday, the only difference between a slip knot and a jam knot is which side the knot's tied, the second knot is tied to. So if I take this and turn it over and I turn this into a slip knot, that's a slipping knot, okay? if I tie the stop knot on this side, the tail can pull through this overhand knot until it jams against it, but it can't go any further. If I tie the knot on this side of the tail instead, on the standing end and not the tail end, what's going to happen when you pull this down is nothing, right? It's not going, this is not going anywhere. So what you have is you have this, and then you have a slip loop. This knot does no good whatsoever at that point. There's no reason to even have it, right? That's the difference between having that stop knot on there and not having a stop knot on there, is that when you pull it down, when you pull this down, what you're going to get is you're going to get this, and it's going to stop. Because you don't have anything, this is trying to unloosen itself. So again, if I tie this in a knot, and I come around here, I tie this in a knot over the top of that same line, then I have a jam. Because as I'm pulling this knot is creeping up into this spot right here, so that they're jammed together, pinching this piece of cordage. But as long as this doesn't move, the single arbor doesn't move, or I'm pulling stress against this line, it's always going to be in that jam. As soon as I have multiple pieces inside here, and this can happen, the knot's going to loosen up, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to do something that Ashley suggests in his book with a binding knot, and we're going to use a regular slip knot, right? Just like this, and we're going to leave ourselves some tail on that slip knot. So we're going to come around this bad boy here, just like this, and we're going to tie this thing to it like this. And now what do we have? We have a slip knot right here, right? And we're going to grab a hold of this and pull it around like this. And with this, we're going to tie a square knot. Left over right, right over left if I'm not being dyslexic. I'm not. Now, I have the same effect, but I don't have any slip because everything was tied tight. And now, all I have to do is capsize the square knot, and it comes undone. And this is just a slip loop, so it comes undone, right? So I don't have anything jammed where I can't recover my cordage at all, and I get exactly the same effect, okay? So I wanted to give you that piece of free chicken today to show you kind of a, and I'm not necessarily saying that you should do this and you shouldn't do anything else. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you're looking at this stuff from a survival standpoint, and everything you have is a resource, and you want to try to recover everything possible, cutting bank line to make something that's semi-permanent, and then having to cut it off, then you wasted the cordage. With this method, you can always recover it. We're using this bank line for this, right? I don't need to do that. If I've got my shelter kit, I have 4 extra pieces of cordage in there. That's paracord, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So the cordage comes from my shelter kit. It's 6 feet long. I didn't have to cut it. I could wrap it around there 3 or 4 times if I wanted to and then tie it off. Doesn't matter how many times I wrap it around. As long as I'm using a slip loop to tighten it and a square knot to finish it, I can always recover it. So if I don't want a bunch of line laying on the ground because I got 6 feet, I just wrap it around a few more times. But now I'm using something I've already got in my kit. I didn't have to cut anything off of this roll of line, which I may need later for fishing line or something else. And cutting 2-foot pieces off at a whack to build something with is going to reduce that 100-foot line really, really quickly. So if I don't have to do that, I don't want to. So the more multifunctional I can make that shelter kit and those pieces of cordage I've already got cut, the better off I am. I'm conserving this resource for other things. Everybody understand all that? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, pretty simple. Square knots left over right over left, or right over left over right, whichever way you want to go. And a slip knot's just tying a knot around the line that it can slip through.